Good day. We are coming to you from Malaysia, and my name is Lim Soon Heng, one of the co-founders and co-owners of KL Shakespeare Players. With me today are Lim Ken Lee, who is also a co-owner and co-founder of KL Shakespeare Players, and the artistic director of Masa Kini Sabira Sheikh. We will share with you our journeys, our experiences, and our interactions, and perhaps our adoption of Commedia in Malaysia. Okay, let's start with your own encounters and your own experiences with Commedia dell'Arte. So, Sabira.
Um, yeah, Sun Heng, I came across Commedia dell'Arte when I was in the United States, when I was doing my master's in theater. And that was in 1977, I think. We learned theater history, and so Commedia dell'Arte was one of the topics. But unfortunately, we were not able, or we were not taught the physical or the techniques of Commedia dell'Arte. But it was very much later, almost 20 years later, when I was in NIDA, that I came across Commedia dell'Arte again, and then learned the techniques and stuff like that.
NIDA is in Australia.
Yes, in Sydney. Really.
I mean, what led you to NIDA? And I mean, was there a particular interest in dealing with Commedia?
Not really, you know. I was doing a lot of summer school there. Almost every December, I would take time off and go to script writing or musicals or directing musicals and stuff like that. And the last time that I went there, Commedia was what I came across in NIDA.
When you were there in NIDA, what kind of training was it? Was the summer workshop theoretical, practical? What was it?
It was both practical and theory. It was for 2 weeks. Most of the workshops or the summer schools were 2 weeks. So 2 weeks, and after that, you had to give a presentation, you know? So that was really fun because you have strangers you've never met for 2 weeks, and then they become friends, and then you fool around with Commedia with all the techniques and stuff like that. It was really a lot of fun.
Kenley, what was your experience with Commedia? How did you encounter it?
Yeah. Uh, I think it was back in 1995 when I started to learn the Italian language at the university. And in the textbook, I remember seeing a whole page introducing the key characters of Commedia dell'Arte. You know, they showed the drawings of Arlecchino, Pantalone, and I was quite fascinated. I said, oh, okay, that's I never heard of this before, and it looks quite interesting. And because I was also interested in theater, and then a year after, Marco Luli came to Malaysia, and he invited by Joe and Farida under the Actor Studio to conduct a series of Commedia dell'Arte workshop. And back then, he also had his wife travel with him, Luciana. And I participated in the workshop. I had such great time. It really opened up my eye about the world of Commedia dell'Arte. And yeah, and since then, Marco came back several times, and sometimes I invited him over through my own theater company. And I think that what I learned in the Commedia dell'Arte has influenced how I approach theater and how I see theater. But okay, Sun Heng, but how about you yourself?
No, my encounter with, of course, with Marco Luli came about because our theater company invited him over, and so that was my first encounter with Commedia. Although I think I've seen aspects of it as manifested in films, in like Charlie Chaplin and the way he carries his body, the way he moves. But in terms of Commedia, any kind of training, it came with Marco Luli. What was the compelling reason for you two to be involved in Commedia? In that, what about it do you bring into your own craft?
But
Savera?
to answer that, I think Basically, our own traditions is commedia in the sense that we work a lot with our body. It is not psychological. And the techniques are all physical techniques, as Indian dance, kabuki, Japanese or Beijing opera, you know. So Balinese dance, these are all physical techniques. You have that certain kind of balance that you need to do with the body, that unstable balance, which is also in commedia. So I find that when I first started and I did Tai Chi and I did Silat, these are all things that are really physical. These are techniques which I can use in theater. And then learning the basic or the techniques of commedia as characters, you know, this character has this sort of behavior, the way he walks, the way he speaks, you know, that added on to what I have been working in the techniques of the Asian techniques.
I think that the wonder of Commedia dell'Arte for me is that it's like it its theory, its teaching affects a lot of things, but you don't see them in the surface. Like you, if you, for example, I did quite a number of shows. My company mostly does Shakespeare. We use a lot of elements, but we don't like really like very overt commedia dell'arte. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Yeah.
yeah. It's the overstretching of the body, it's the movements and stuff like that, but which is Comedia, which is also Asian, which is also ancient. You know, I
Yeah.
feel that it's all one. But for me, Comedia is that specific doctore, the specific behavior of the Harlequin and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That to me,
and these stock characters, you can find resonance also in the traditional theater, in a Malaysian theater. You know, they also always have also someone like a like clown. They have also an
yes,
old man characters. Yeah,
yes,
So from
it
Comedia, what I'm hearing you both say is that you find the stock characters and the physicality of these stock characters that you could borrow and use in your own productions. So beyond
absolutely.
that, Sabira, you mentioned that there's something about comedia's movements that you found very interesting in that, like traditional dancing, there's always that moment where they're off balance, the body is kind of stretched to its extremes. You know, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, the expression that was used by Eugenio Baba of what's that? The
Odin.
Odin Theatre. Yes, about that. That's the moment of excitation because the body is imbalance, off balance, and then it can go right or left or back. So it's a moment of you can pivot. So
And
I
that
guess in theater is about creating those moments of excitation.
yes, and also that allows for enhanced scenic, your own scenic presence on stage. You know, when you're working on your extremities, always on one foot or on your toes and or on an elbow and stuff like that. It gives you that that imbalance that you don't know what's going to happen, and it gives you that energy as well. That I think it's a very primordial energy that get to go through the body itself, you know, and gives you that extra what do you say, that presence on stage, you know.
What have you both done with Comedia in your productions? I know you have mentioned that it's not necessarily overtly borrowing all the elements of Comedia with the stock characters, with the specific movements, but what have you done with what you know about Comedia?
I did a number of shows. I think the very first one I used some elements of Commedia dell'arte as an actor was in a production of called Tartuffe. So in a Molière's Tartuffe, and in it I play Cleonte, and I remember the director told me, he said, okay, you know, I see that this Cleon is someone who is very neurotic, who is always moving about, a bit like a character of a chicken or a rooster. So I said, okay. And so I think at that time, I just came out from a workshop with Marco Luli. So I took some inspiration from Pantalone, the shape of his whole body, you know, where he leaned forward a little bit like that. And then I also took some inspiration from Alechino, where he's always a very, you know, like a bit of how the staccato movement, and like a bit like a cat or a monkey, and but I turn it into more like a loose rooster, like, you know, like this, yeah. And after that, when I started my own company, Shakespeare, of course, you know that Shakespeare has written a lot of characters. A lot of his plays started with these stock characters in Commedia dell'Arte. And of course, then eventually he transformed them. Actually, Sun Heng, for example, you were in one of the KL Shakespeare production, The Merchant of Venice, and you play Shylock.
Yeah,
And
we
you were
created
asked
a
to
mask.
wear a mask. So maybe you want to share a bit of your experience
Yeah,
with that?
we, of course, we had a mask, and we used the mask, which is the mask is quite a central feature in Commedia, the half mask. For the role that I played as Shylock, we created a half mask for a very specific reason. At first, to kind of evoke the images in Commedia, but also to allow the audience and to show that the other characters project what they want to project on Shylock. So the mask becomes a projection of who Shylock is, not based on Shylock himself, but on how people see him. And then later in a scene, in that speech when Shylock says, kind of complains about why Antonio picks on him, he says, because I am a Jew. And in that scene, Shylock then takes off the mask and looks at the audience in the eye to kind of express this, hath not a Jew eyes, hath not a Jew hands. That was the speech. That's how we have used it in our Merchant of Venice.
He was wont to call me usurer. Let him look to his bond. He was wont to lend her money for a Christian courtesy. Let him look to his bond.
Why, I'm sure if he forfeit, thou will not take his flesh.
What's that good for? To pay first without! If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge! He hath disgraced me and hindered me 500,000. After my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains. And what is his reason? I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes? And not a Jew heads?
I think similarly also with my adaptation of the Tempest in Shakespeare's Tempest, we had actors who were not belonging to the island having their faces painted. And so they had masks on, and the fairies and all the other little so-called animals had half masks. And these also allowed them to behave in not so human ways, you know? And I remember Sun Heng, you yourself had to be unbalanced a lot of time, not only because you were drunk or the character was drunk, but it was something that you really had to work on your extremities during that time, didn't you?
Yeah, playing Trinculo, one of the servants. Yeah.
Yeah, but Sabira, you brought up a very interesting point. You were saying that, you know, by putting the mask, somehow you say like that they could find certain kind of character, like, you know. And I remember we did something called trance mask, which is a training approach by this British master in improvisation, Keith Johnston. And one of his techniques is really about, so he has a lot of these half mask they are not Commedia dell'Arte style. I think he some like maybe he created his own or something. So they are not the conventional Commedia dell'Arte mask. And the way he train the actors is like, okay, he will ask the actors just to pick a mask without looking at it. It's quite contrary to the traditional way of approaching mask. I think usually you have to study the mask and look, and then before you put on. But this one, he's asking the actors, don't look at it, like, you know, don't have to study it. And you hold it ready. The coach or the instructor will then ask you to put on the mask, and he will hold up a mirror in front of you. And the moment you see your reflection wearing the mask, you know, and you have to open your mouth, and then you have to let whatever sound that come out, and it's very often it's very primeval, it's animalistic, and then we very often see the actors started to move like a very animals, like, you know, sometimes can be quite scary. Maybe that's why he called it trance mask. It's like, as if like they are a different person, they are in a trance.
I think the mask allows you to transform and become something else.
Yeah.
And found a lot of us were doing that, weren't we?
Yeah, yes.
Good. You know nothing about this mask. As soon as you see the back? As soon as you see this face moving out, this creature makes sound, keep going, whatever happens.
I think for me, Commedia is more the physical technique. It's the physical technique of the actor, that he has to learn this technique of all the ways of walking in all the characters, you know. Although during that time, Commedia, the actor honed in on only one character. But I think being able to do and to perform all the characters is something every actor should be able to do. To work with this kind of.
This Commedia then in Malaysia and in the present moment, something more important as a tool for training rather than a genre that we want to kind of can perform. That, you know, if like let's do a Commedia performance in Malaysia, what will that? How wide would the appeal be, as opposed to, okay, let's use Commedia to train our actors, and that would have a stronger appeal, at least to a group of people?
Well, I don't know, Kian Lee. What do you think? Because I feel people may not be able to attach themselves to the characters, but if you brought the training and took it into a Malaysian context, it might.
Yeah, I think that if you just present the Commedia dell'Arte, the original so-called style here, we will watch it like something exotic. Oh, it's in Italy. It's just like when you
curiosity.
you watch a kabuki from Japan, or you watch a Chinese Beijing opera show and all that. Okay, they are interesting, but you know that it is from a different culture. So for me, it's like if you want to have Commedia more. Bring it closer to people outside of Italy, like in Malaysia.
More integrated in our culture.
Yeah, you need to integrate, because there are a lot of similarities. So the old man who likes money, the miser who likes to go after young women, the lovers, you know, the very cunning kind of servants, all these exist in a lot of culture, you know. Yeah. So instead of dressing like a Commedia dell'Arte kind of a costume and all that, maybe you can find a local equivalent and just use some of the technique of Commedia.
And as you said, Sun Heng, Charlie Chaplin. No, he dressed up in a different way, but he had Commedia's actions and movements and stuff like that. So,
and maybe, and maybe as a wrap to this is, we should put the challenge to us, train enough actors to do a performance that is based on maybe the stock characters and the movements, but with a completely local story?
I believe that would be a fantastic thing.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.